mercilessly over the Hijaz desert, turning the rocky valleys and winding paths near Mecca into a furnace. Dust swirled around every traveler, coating clothes, skin, and spirits alike. It was a time of quiet upheaval in tribal Arabia. A man from the Quraysh tribe was speaking of one God, justice, and life after death. His message was splitting families and turning neighbor against neighbor. Among those traveling the desert roads was a woman burning with resentment. She had been raised in the old ways, honoring the ancestral gods and tribal customs that held her world together. But this new message had cost her dearly. Relatives had joined the movement, neighbors had abandoned tradition, and the ground beneath her feet felt uncertain. She walked with bitterness in her heart, her loyalty to the old ways hardened into open hatred. As the path narrowed near some black basalt rocks, she caught up with another traveler ahead of her. He wore a simple, sun-faded robe and carried a small water skin. There was nothing proud or flashy about him, just another weary man making his way through the heat. By custom, desert travelers often kept each other company, so she quickened her pace and fell in beside him. He greeted her gently. His voice was calm, his eyes strangely deep and untroubled. She answered shortly, her guard already up. But the desert road offers no escape from whoever walks beside you, and as the miles stretched on, the silence grew heavy. The desert has a way of drawing out what people keep bottled inside. She began to talk, first about the rough road, then inevitably about the man who had become the shadow over her life. Her words grew sharper, tumbling out like loose stones. She cursed his message, called him a divider of families, a destroyer of tradition, a man who spoke of heavens he had never seen and demanded worship of a God no elder had acknowledged. She raged about sons questioning fathers, old alliances crumbling, and the chaos this new faith had sown. Her voice rose with the heat, her hands slashing at the air as if she could erase his memory. She did not recognize his face. In the dust-choked light, he remained simply a stranger walking through her storm. And he listened. He did not interrupt. He did not flinch or fire back with wounded pride. He simply walked with quiet steadiness, an anchor in the turbulence of her words. When her throat grew dry from heat and anger, he unstopped his water skin and offered it without a word. When the path grew steep and her steps faltered, he slowed to match her pace and reached out a hand when the stones shifted under her feet. When she finally fell silent, breathless and spent, he spoke. His voice was low and unhurried, the voice of someone who had learned that truth needs no force to make its way. He spoke of patience, not as giving up, but as the quiet strength that endures fire without burning away. He spoke of mercy, of how hearts that curse often hide a wound, and how tongues that lash out sometimes cry out for peace. He never defended himself. He didn't need to. His words were not a shield but a mirror, showing her the human being beneath her hostility. There was no triumph in his eyes, only a deep, unsettling compassion. Slowly, almost without her noticing, the edge in her voice began to soften. Not because he had argued her down, but because his very presence unraveled her. She watched him share his last days, adjust his stride to shield her from the sun, and answer every attack with a stillness that felt ancient and unshakable. The desert itself seemed to grow quiet. She began to notice what her anger had hidden. His hands wore no rings of status, his eyes held no mockery, and his silence was not emptiness but fullness. Doubt crept into her fortress of certainty. She had expected a fanatic, a schemer, a man of pride. Instead, she walked beside someone whose dignity needed no announcement, whose authority required no force. The road stretched on, but something inside her had already begun to change. The wind carried away the heat of her earlier words, leaving a hollow space that only truth could fill. The moment of recognition came quietly, as truth often does. Perhaps a passing merchant greeted him with respect. Perhaps it was the way he spoke of revelation not as boasting but as a burden entrusted to a servant. Perhaps it was simply the weight of his conduct, which could no longer be mistaken for mere politeness. Whatever the turning point, the veil lifted. She stopped. Dust settled around her feet. Her breath caught as the pieces came together, the face she had cursed in her mind now matched the man who had given her water, listened without judgment, and walked beside her in grace. Her hands trembled. The words she had thrown like stones now fell back on her, heavy with understanding. She had cursed a prophet to his face, and he had answered her with mercy. The tears came slowly, a thaw rather than a flood. She fell to her knees in the dust, not beaten, but surrendered. The armor she had carried so long cracked open, and beneath it lay a heart that had been waiting, without knowing it, for something true. She spoke the words of faith, her voice shaking but clear, bearing witness to one God and the prophethood of the man standing before her. The desert wind seemed to pause. He did not gloat. He did not demand proof. He simply placed a hand over his heart, his eyes showing a quiet gratitude beyond any victory. From that day, the woman who had walked the road as an enemy walked it as a believer. Her story would echo in gatherings of the faithful, not as a tale of conquest, but as proof of the power of character. She had not been won by debate, but by presence. Not subdued by force, but disarmed by grace. Stories like this survive across generations not because they are locked in history books, but because they carry a living truth that outlasts time. Whether recorded in formal accounts or passed through hearts that recognize the prophet's light in small acts of kindness, they remind us that the deepest invitations are never spoken in anger, but lived in patience. The desert road fades, the footprints vanish in the wind, but the lesson stays written on the soul. When mercy walks beside hatred, hatred does not win. It learns. And in that learning, hearts turn, paths change, and the quiet dignity of a prophet becomes the bridge from enmity to faith.